Jason. And Vic Morrow.
The company found out about the change of color, I think sometimes it had to be in the fourth season. We actually experimented and shot a sequence in color that was printed in black and white for the fourth year, and then we used a little piece of that sequence in the fifth year. So it had to be sometime during that fourth year. I didn't hear about it going to color until it was, I think we were in between. We got the wind that was going to be in color.
We disagreed generally because we felt that although there's some footage that had been done by Stevens, the big director during the war, had some color, but I felt that black and white was the ingredient for the period.
Well, the fifth season for me, it suffered because of the color, in my opinion.
Sarge, don't you?
I know Pierre thought it was better in black and white. He may have been right. It's subjective. I think I liked the idea of it more because I thought it might help the show in the ratings.
You know, it just doesn't look the same. You know, it just has a prettiness to it, a niceness. Well, it's colorful, for heaven's sakes.
Possibly so. It's in the eye of the beholder because a lot of people thought it was a great, great move, and I'm sure some of the old diehard people thought it was not a good thing to happen to the show because they were so hooked into the black and white.
I thought we lost starkness, we lost the grittiness and a lot. On the other hand, I'll never forget the first day in dailies when we were sitting on the big screen and saw it in color. I was impressed, I must say.
World War II was in black and white. We all know that. It was never in color. So when we went to color, it was a little too pretty. I personally, besides watching all of the explosions and the action, I like to see the guys gritty and a little dirty and sweaty, and it just didn't work the same in color.
If you want to make it look grittier, they use filters on it and they wash out the color to where it's almost not color. It's color, but it isn't color. They could have done that. They didn't choose to.
So, hey, we had to go along with it. They decided to go to color. So we just accepted it, you know.
And it changed the whole texture and feel of the show when the color adds a depth that it just doesn't have in black and white. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not so good, but in this case I think it probably helped it a little bit.
Well, you had to be very careful when you were shooting in color. Everybody had to be. They had to know what the wardrobe was going to look like in color. They had to make tests.
We had a couple of wardrobe changes that were essential because you were going to color. And the other olive drabs were specially designed to be filmed with the black and whites. So there was some adjusting to be done.
It restricted where you were shooting a little bit.
Because now that it was in color, you have to light it a lot more.
As far as Emmett was concerned, I mean, we shot just as late and just as early. It made no difference to him. And he was brilliant with it. He knew so much that it was almost made you ill. He'd squint his eyes down where you couldn't see anything. You know, you think, Emmett, are you having trouble? He says, I'm stopped down. It didn't change his speed one iota. And that's amazing, really. Join it. That's what he said. You join the light, whatever light you have, you join it. And so that's why he was able to move so quickly. He just opened the lens up. Combat had been shooting at MGM for 4 years. And they decided to move it to CBS for money reasons. And they only moved the interior stuff. The exteriors were still shot at MGM and in Franklin Canyon and all of those places, so no one ever knew the difference.
It's hard not to miss MGM because, you know, I mean, we were so used to it, and it was so easy to prepare shows because, you know, you look at the show and you say, okay, we got 6 days. Guess what? 4 of them are here. And I know where. I know exactly where they're going to be. So we missed it, certainly in that respect, and also missed it in the sense that we didn't have the big villages. That's why we went back in the 5th year a couple of times, because you needed the villages and you needed the burned out and the busted up things like that, which were right in our backyard at MGM.
Some argument went on. The MGM got a little perturbed about some of the damage that had been done, and they wanted more money to repair the sets and repair this and that. There was some bickering with Selig and MGM, and something went on, you know, and somebody said something, and someone gave someone the finger, and, you know, whatever. And that's how it worked out, you know, and oh, well, we're going to go over there, you know. And, of course, they didn't really want us to go because they really liked having us blow up their streets and then pay for it, to put them back the way they were before you got there. You know, they insisted upon that.
But they did give us access to it and charged us a lot of money to go there for one lousy day, but we ate it.
The CBS studio was a sorry example of a studio, you know, as compared to MGM. I mean, when you think MGM was really an incredible factory.
Well, when we moved to CBS at the end of the 4th season, it was like a homecoming to me. I had been there earlier in another series called The Law and Mr. Jones. And I knew the lot, I knew a lot of the people that were still there, and I thought it was great. It was much smaller, more intimate atmosphere because the studio's not that big. And you can walk from one end to the other in 5 minutes or less.
MGM had mammoth stages and had some wonderful high stages where you went up 4 stories. They had great tanks in there where you could fill them full of water. They could do all sorts of stuff. They didn't have that over at CBS.
I was curious what it would do to the production value because they didn't have the location facilities like the back lot and the European street that we could blow up 50 times.
They had, I don't know how many stages they have. They had maybe a third of the stages, if that. But they were newer. They were usually on concrete, and that was tough. Tough on your legs. Most of the stages at MGM were elevated. There was a basement under them. So you were on wood. It was a big, big difference.
CBS was okay, just they didn't have any back lot or anything. So most of the stuff we were doing on location.
Anytime they wanted to shoot a tree, they had to go off the set, so it was location shooting. The few standing sets they had, very limited choices.
There was a tiny little back lot. There was the pond that Gilligan's Island shot in, and some greenery around it. There was a little bit of a Western Street, which didn't do you much good. No, we had to go off the lot for that. So we went back to MGM. And it didn't make much sense.
Franklin Canyon. In season 5, that pretty much was the backlot for combat, since you didn't have the MGM backlot.
In the middle of Los Angeles, right literally in the middle of town, there was a reservoir, which fed most of us our water every day. When you drove over the hill and looked down on that reservoir, it looked just like southern France.
Franklin Canyon was a blessing to us because, first of all, it was really close to the studio. You just went around the bend and came down a little hill and something, and you were in Franklin Canyon.
Franklin Canyon was very good because it was very close to my house, so I didn't have to drive very much. I would go from here, go to Franklin over the hill. So I didn't have to go to the studio and be driven, you know. That was a little bone of contention from the Teamsters, you know. But, hey, come on, you know.
Now, strangely enough, in the middle of Beverly Hills, it was isolated. I mean, you can't dream that it's there.
It had the big lake and the pine trees and the hills, and it was gorgeous to look at because of the desert surroundings and Los Angeles itself, which is not gorgeous.
Almost every episode, you are running up and down those hills. This squad is going through the same culvert from episode to episode, fighting over the same pipes.
And it did give you a lot of different looks. It really did. Besides the lower reservoir with big lake, little lake, and the upper one, a bigger lake. It had starkness to it. It had a lot of green to it. It really lended itself to a lot of places. It was a blessing for us in the 5th year.
They used to build some buildings, temporary buildings to use.
We had great control there. It wasn't a problem at all. Great place to park equipment, and then you can shoot 360 degrees around it.
As you can see, we use the canals.
We used it before, even though we had access to MGM. We still used Franklin a number of times prior to that last year.
And it was cooler there. Los Angeles is pretty hot, and coming down into there with the water and the trees, it was much cooler. It was a great place to work. I enjoyed it very much. It was beautiful.
If you go to Franklin Canyon today, it looks very different, but you can find those same culverts, those same pipes. I've got a picture of myself going through the same culvert that Rick Jason crawled through, and it's one of my favorite pictures of all time.
And they're still picking up cartridges from there.
The Losers, Season 5. It's got an absolutely unique look to the beginning, which was also the same beginning we used in The Partisan, because it's not Franklin, it is not MGM, it is actually downtown Los Angeles, where a couple of buildings have been demolished. And director Caffey went down there, filmed some gorgeous stuff there for both The Losers and second unit work for Partisan.
My brother looked around and around, trying to find something new and different, and he came upon this building, which was about a 5-story building, been reduced to about 3.5. It's sort of broken down because they tried to blow it up and weren't succeeding, and then they're going to blow it up again. So we figured we'll shoot a show there, using that as part of the background. Then we shot the rest of it up in Gertville. It was unimaginable building. It was like shooting something in Germany. You saw in pictures of these buildings still half standing, 3/4 standing. We went out there and did a second unit to begin with because they were going to blow it up again. So we just went out with Emmett and a couple of cameras, maybe 3 cameras, and shot it. We had some Germans and GI extras. We had our usual doubles. So we started shooting, and I did what was written. We had to wait 3 hours for them to load this building up. And during that 3 hours, here I'm doing my 3rd show, I decided, well, I'm not going to sit here. That's nonsense. So I got the extras out, and I had them sneaking into the building, Vic and them sneaking in, a double for Rick. I had them coming out. You swear that it was him, of course. I had them have a little firefight with the Germans. I had the Germans sneaking in, the Germans sneaking out. 25 minutes of film. And if my brother hadn't been producer, they probably would have fired me. What are you doing, But no one said a word. Well, it all came back. The last show we shot was a 5-day show because of that. We used that stuff.
Bronson Canyon was right off of Franklin Boulevard, which ran right into the heart of Hollywood. You go from all the houses, you could see some of the houses from being down in the canyon itself. You go from Hollywood and the houses and the streets and the cars into this canyon where you felt like you were in the Rocky Mountains with holes in it. They must have shot 100,000 movies in those caves, and there was a kind of, I guess, ambiance at being there because you sort of almost felt the ghosts of all those people that had been there. And it was great. I loved it.
If you go out of town, if you go on location, I shouldn't say it always helps, but it does help in getting things you just don't have here in Southern California. After 4 years, they wanted to try to do something a little different. You had a new producer. It was his desire to go up and freshen up the show.
Corbell, there were at least 3 episodes filmed at the winery.
It was just unbelievably good and perfect for us. And certainly the wine country, there's nothing like it down here. It's different, and it looks like France.
Well, it was a beautiful place to shoot. I mean, we had a lot of fun.
The Corbell brothers love to have the combat cast come out there.
They treated us like royalty. I mean, open the winery, the champagne, and everything else. Shoot anywhere you want to, in the vineyards and all that.
The Corbell brothers were magnificent. They treated us like dear old friends.
That first night at the Corbells, everybody lost perspective.
Oh, the Corbell brothers would come out to the set every day with orange juice for the cast, which was actually mimosas filled with the Corbell wine. There is a picture of the cast all holding up wine glasses, and the eyes are a little glazed on every one of them. So I think they'd been rehearsing a bit at Corbell.
So the next day, unfortunately, these guys had to haul a big gun up and down hills. Well, I won't try to be polite. They didn't vomit, they puked all over the place. Because it was like 95 degrees and 98 humidity. It was tough sledding that day.
That wonderful hill that the gun was shot on, they leveled the hill. They completely removed the hill, so you can't even find that. Now, one reason the Corbell brothers did like combat to come, and A.D. Flowers loved to go out there, because they let them blow things up. There was a bridge that had to come down anyway. So for the losers, they blew up a real bridge. That was not a prop Hollywood bridge. Absolutely destroyed it. And Corbell's in the middle of redwood country. Big stumps, if you want to remove them, expensive. The requirement was anytime they blew something up, they had to blow up at least one stump and clear it so that they could plant for Corbell.
One of the great things about going on location, as I said, is the camaraderie that you have with the cast and the crew after the show's finished for the day. And a lot of the very gorgeous local color tends to come around at night because they can't do much but watch on the set. And they can be very friendly. And I found that one of the most interesting things about those kinds of locations is that we were all young and frisky, and it was a great ego booster to talk to some of the local color. And it was fun to work too. I was a little surprised when Gene Levitt left the series. He was fairly well entrenched, and the show had done fairly well with him. And I never really asked and never found out why he left.
Gene Levitt left the show because he wanted to direct. And he was a very good director too, by the way. And he could communicate with people. And he enjoyed doing that, I think, a lot. He saw a lot of it going on, and he just wanted to do it. He wanted to get away from it. He'd done it for 4 years, and that was enough.
Levitt definitely left his mark on the series. He established absolutely that the Sarge was in control, and the Sarge was everywhere. And unfortunately, that was really tiring out Vic Morrow. So by the time you got to 5th season, you had a very exhausted lead character who had been established as the core and the heart of the show, and you just plain couldn't use him as much.
I had some personal difficulties with Gene, because when I did that first season and I was nominated for the Emmy, Gene had been assigned to, I think it was a movie or a television show that was being filmed in the Caribbean, and he left the show for 2 or 3 episodes, and they brought in a substitute producer. He did the show that I was nominated for, and I noticed when Gene came back, he seemed okay. But when the nomination came out, he just changed. Well, I think his classic line was, "We don't know how this happened, but just because some guy back east thinks you're good, don't take that too serious." So I thought, okay, I think we know where we stand now. And he never was very friendly after that. And the only thing I can attribute it to is that he wasn't the producer of record on the show instead of Mr. Goldstone. So, and that's probably my own pettiness.
A lot of the changes in season 5 were not just in front of the camera, but they were behind the camera as well. We had the promotion of Kathy to the production, and that made a huge difference in how the stories were done and how the cast worked with the staff backstage.
My brother was associate producer on the show from the beginning. Head production, something executive it was, and then associate producer. They gave him that title. And he ran it to a great degree, you know, especially the physical part. And then in the 5th year, my brother took over and did it all year.
Okay?
It was a logical step, of course.
I thought he was good. I was glad to see him get it because he'd worked very hard and he'd stayed through the tough times to get there. So I was happy for him.
The budgets on the show kept increasing, of course. They kept increasing because the cast got paid a little bit more, directors got paid a little bit more, everything went up.
In the 4th season, more so in the 5th, but it started in the 4th season, it became a bit of a money thing with Vic. He felt he was worth more money, and who in the hell could argue with him?
Vic wanted $10,000 a week, and that was a lot of money then. Television hadn't quite gotten to the big money that they pay, certainly not like today's standards.
Most of the guest stars were getting $800, $750 an episode. $10,000 was a tremendous amount of money. You could buy several cars with that.
We all got him, took him over to the retake room and said, Vic, are you out of your mind? Are you crazy? $10,000 an episode? You know, the whole cast doesn't get $10,000. And he said, that's what they're going to give me or I ain't coming back. Well, you don't do combat without Vic Morrow, and he knew it. So they got it. So that began a little bit of a feud between him and ABC, which wasn't as tough as with Selig on the set, and that Selig would come by every once in a while and we could hear yelling and screaming.
They gave him a really bad time with wanting that much more money, including having him followed by a private detective to try to get something on him so they could use it as a lever. So I thought that was interesting that they were willing to go to that length to keep from paying him. I was not privy to the negotiations with Rick after Vic got the money that he wanted, but I think it boiled down to whatever Vic got, Rick would get, whatever the final figure was. So he didn't have to negotiate for his. He just took the money. What a great thing to let somebody else do your dirty work for you and you walk in and get the gravy.
But meanwhile, the cast regulars, they were making about $1,500 an episode, more or less. That's a huge difference between the stars and the regulars.
Most of the contracts were up at the end of year 5, except mine. Everybody was thinking that they were going to get a pretty good raise. It would be in the works that when they renegotiated, and I think the network took that as a bad thing. I think Jack would have asked for much more money, and probably Pierre. I'm not sure about Peabody, and I don't know what I would have done either.
Selmer was in trouble, so I'm pretty sure that they were trying to save money. I don't know what kind of salaries the guest star were getting, but we were getting the same, you know. We suffered for it, you know.
One of my huge disappointments with season 5 is you lost that cast interaction. There was only one episode in the entire season that featured the entire cast. And we just so love to watch Vic and Rick and Dick and Pierre all together. But we did not get that opportunity in season 5, which was a shame.
I have a theory about why the squad didn't work so much in the fifth year, because color is an expensive process. And one of the things I noticed over a period of time is that the network didn't like to spend money on the show. And I'm sure by the 5th year it was getting more and more expensive. I think the salaries were up enough on most of the actors to where if you put 2 or 3 in instead of 5 or 6, you would save some money.
We knew that so many guys at that point could carry scripts. Also, I think that because of the raises everybody got, they were probably getting 10 out of 13 as opposed to guarantee in every show. So all of a sudden you read a script and say, what the hell are we doing with Peabody in this? We don't need him. Why are we paying him? He's out. You know, same thing with Pierre or anybody.
They limited most of us, with the possible exception of Jack, to 7 out of 13 episodes, which was a contractual obligation for them.
Or there was nothing to do, and those guys had reached the point when they were acting enough and were good enough to say, what the hell am I in this for? You know, I don't have any lines, or I'm just standing around like an idiot.
Ultimately, you do want more to do. I don't mean to denigrate the fact that we didn't do anything and we didn't care.
The cast wasn't happy about not being in it. They were unhappy about being in it and not having anything to say. But they were also unhappy because they weren't in it because they didn't get paid.
And a lot of times they would write us in the show, but we were more like background and fill. And it used to bother me a little bit. I think it bothered some of the other actors from time to time.
So it was a kind of a no-win situation either way. Yeah, it was for money, and it was, as I say, if they were in it and they didn't have anything to say, they would complain. 5th year, they've been all this time, they're saying, hey, I'm Kirby, what the hell am I doing here? What am I, you know, carrying a spear? Okay, you're not in the next weeks. Why am I not in the next weeks? You know, so.
I don't know that Jack or Pierre or Peabody, or I don't know that whether they actually went to Kaffee and said, put me in more stuff, give me more lines, I'm not doing enough. To my knowledge, it didn't happen, but I never really talked to any of the guys about that. I suspect it probably did.
I didn't see boredom setting in as far as the regulars were concerned. They all were just as anxious to do their best.
All right, let's pull out.
It's tough to keep your enthusiasm up. And I think by the end of the show, I don't think a lot of people cared much if they were big in the show or not. Just do it, take the money, and run.
I'm home. The phone rings. I go to the phone, pick up the phone, and he said, yes. He said, Pierre, this is John Sturges. I said, oh my God, where are you? He said, I'm in London, and I'm getting ready to do a Grand Prix. And he said, I want you to play the Frenchman. 10 weeks guarantee, co-star with Steve McQueen. I said, you gotta be kidding. He said, no, I'm not. I'll talk to you later. Right away, I pick up the phone and I call my agent, and we have a meeting at ABC to kill me or send me to the hospital so that I can go to Europe and do a movie. They turned me down. I said, well, gentlemen, although I'm under contract to you, I will stay home. So the hell with you for your combat. So they put me on suspension. All over town, there's a memo that went around that I was unemployable because I was on breach of contract.
You didn't have to do much to get crossways with ABC and or Seligman. He had a sensitivity about the show, curiously enough. He didn't mind kind of squelching the actors.
The phone rings and it's Vic on the phone. He said, Pierre, where are you, you son of a bitch? We missed you, you know. You know very well they'll destroy you. They will destroy you. You must come back because we can't do it without you. So I said, well, let me think about it. So I hang up. Then I get a call from John Sturges' secretary. The feature had been canceled in Europe because Steve McQueen was doing the Sandspebble in the East. So I was free. So I called up and I said, okay, I'll be there. So I went back up to work. So that's my beginning of my color sequence on Combat.
You want to smoke, McCall?
Nah, reckon I got my own.
William Bryant, he joined the show season 5 as a semi-regular. He was in quite a few episodes. We'd seen him earlier in the show in different characters, most notably in the 4th season episode, The Leader, where he played basically the old Kirby. He was the troublemaker, the wisecracker, the guy that didn't want to cooperate at all. By season 5, big change was in the Kirby character. He became good old Kirby instead of the Kirby we love to hate. So they needed to bring in somebody who had that old edge that Jack Hogan used to bring to the part. And William Bryant was just wonderful in the role. I wish we'd seen him more.
Brian was a very nice guy. He was a pretty good actor.
Bill Bryant and I were friends from way back when I was casting The Rebel.
We enjoyed him. We began to realize that he was becoming a regular.
Cage, you got another one of those?
You have to wait until I put the pack away?
All right, forget it.
We also realized that he was a friend of George, so we accepted it. I mean, who are we to tell, you know?
I liked him very much. He was a very charming, personable guy, very easy, and he was a good actor. He had a good history, good background.
He had great voice, great puss, action. He was a terrific athlete. So one of my dear friends.
One of the great things about doing that show was, for the most part, there was very little ego, very little temperament. Everybody got along, and nobody seemed to really have a problem with new people coming in.
On a lot of shows, that would cause some animosity, bringing someone in the last season, but the guys on Combat, they worked great together. They welcomed regular people into the set. They welcomed the guest stars each week. William Bryant got along fine, as far as I know.
It was a great set. And then, now the poor guy tried to blow it up. And they stopped all the trains going through because it back right on the rail line. Big with the main line, it's right there. They had everything shut down. Nobody was moving. And 5 cameras or 4 cameras going, some slow motion, some normal. Kaboom. Well, up this thing went. And the smoke covered it. It built up from the bottom and covered it. And, I can't see anything. Then the smoke cleared. And it was all still standing there. And one little piece, just as we cleared, went, and that was it. And I looked over at the poor guy. He was beating his head against a wall.
Hey, somebody out there!
You hear that? Sounds like somebody's trapped.
He was a good contractor, but he just underestimated what he needed to do. The blood was running down his face. He was seriously beating himself to death is what he was doing when we go stop him. And then we went in and shot the first unit with what was there, and then they had to go in after that and take it apart stone by stone. And this was condemned. It wasn't safe. The building wasn't safe. Horse pucky. It was all reinforced concrete with enormous amount of steel in it. That's why it wouldn't come down. I mean, you could have had a war. You would have liked that as a fort. Let me tell you.
A.D. Flowers, as I said, very serious, but he also had a humorous side to him. One year it was Vic's birthday, and he was filming on the set, and they rolled in this huge cake for him, and they were singing Happy Birthday. And A.D. had set some squibs inside the cake. So as soon as he came over to blow out the candles, pink icing everywhere, all over the fatigues. And that was his birthday that year.